Welcome back to another episode of Mommy Speaks Canto and Mando. 妈咪讲广东话和普通话 where you learn casual and informal conversations in Canto and Mando. These videos are meant to supplement the podcast Cantonese and Mandarin for medical matters and more, but they can go solo as well. If you're interested in hearing the podcast, the link is in the information area below. Okay, let's just get back to the dialogue and recap the last line from the previous video.
咁咪去見醫生咯，那去看醫生吧。
So what's the response to that?
醫咩生啊？自從呢個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到而家一直都冇法子同我醫生聯絡。醫什麼生呀？自從這個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到現在都無法跟我醫生聯絡。
Now with that first rhetorical question,
What doctor?
the Canto and Mando words are all familiar words, although not in the combination that follows.
醫咩生啊？醫什麼生呀？ The core component of this rhetorical question is 醫咩生？醫什麼生? Something that you will find only in colloquial speech. It's highly doubtful that you'll find any grammar lesson on it. The closest comparison to it is how words are inserted in between separable verbs, or what some might say are verb-object compound words. Look, grammar is not high on the list of things to learn when you're just chewing the fat with someone. But sometimes it's the best way to explain certain things. So just suck it up and listen up, okay? Let's say, hypothetically, you were out and about and you have your hands full, but you need some help for something. I don't know, open a door or something like that. So you say to the first person you see, "Give me a hand here." 幫個忙啦，幫個忙吧. So here, the operative word is 幫忙, 幫忙, a compound word, a separable or verb-object compound word that means help. Its root components actually add to our scenario here because the bang by itself means to help, and the mang means to be busy or fully occupied, which is so the situation here, right? But to make sense in Chinese grammar, you say 幫個忙, 幫個忙, and the 個 shoehorned in between the bang and the mang. Since this is ge's role in this verb-object combo where ge acts as a measure word for nouns that don't have a unique measure word, as would be appropriate for mang, the state of being busy or fully occupied. Now, you can just as easily say 幫我忙啦，幫我忙吧, to mean the same thing. Give me a hand here. 幫我忙啦，幫我忙吧. Any of you who knows an inkling of Chinese and watch oodles of C-drama and C-movie will know the English subs are full of varying interpretations. So you can't be uptight and say, hey, how can you say that both 幫我忙啦，幫我忙吧, and 幫我忙啦，幫我忙吧, that they both mean the same thing? They can and do. And the English could have just as well have been the simple, help me please, but give me a hand here is essentially the same thing. If you get a chance to listen to professional translators, you'll hear them saying things that you know, if it were you doing the translation, you'd say it a little differently. And should you ever start translating for people, you'd realize soon enough that when a native says something in Chinese, you'll translate the English in different ways, or whatever language that you're translating, in different ways depending on the context. By the way, if it's not obvious to you yet, the la, ba particle at the end indicates a suggestion, request, or mild command. 幫個忙啦，幫個忙吧. 帮我忙啦，帮我忙吧. So, kind of the same thing is going on here in the dialogues 医咩生啊，医什么生呀, where the word for what, 咩嘢什么, is plopped in between the root components for doctor, the same sounding Canto and Mando 医 that has the meanings of the verbs cure, heal, or the nouns doctor, medical, and seng, sheng, that has the more commonly known meanings of the verbs to give birth to, grow, be afflicted with, or the nouns life, living, or the adjectives unripe, raw, uncooked. But isn't that a kick in the pants to be able to say that 医生, 医生 can be literally translated as a doctor of life, a doctor of living? But I transgress. I just earlier said kind of the same thing is going on here. And I say kind of because this situation is not the same. Because here, 医生, 医生 is not categorized as a separable or verb-object compound word, but a simple compound word that you would normally not separate, ever. We're doing it here as a point of emphasis on the part of the speaker. Now, instead of 医咩生啊，医什么生呀, you can just as easily hear 咩医生啊，什么医生呀, as valid ways in Canto and Mando to say, what doctor? Whatever the case may be, though, when you hear something like 咩医生啊，什么医生呀, what doctor? You can hear a bit of disdain in this rhetorical question, right? And when you wedge 咩嘢, 什么, in between a word, whether it's a separable or verb-object compound word, or a noun in the case for colloquial speech, the expression takes on an added level of negativity. So 咩嘢,什么, in between the first root component for doctor, 医, and its second root component, 生, sheng, to get 医咩嘢生, 医什么生, gives you the added level of negativity onto the word that's being split. That is, 医生, 医生. Now, you know there's lots of wonderful doctors out there. It's just the character in this dialogue that is holding a grudge against her doc, for reasons we shall soon hear more about, which is why we're using this word ordering here to express a higher level of disdain to the word it's parting, 医生, 医生, than if you just used the more, let's say, conventional way, the literal translated way of saying, what doctor? 咩医生啊，什么医生呀? How about another example of 咩嘢,什么, splitting up a word to bring it over to the dark side? For those of you who watch 武术, 武术 drama, there's always one or more 英雄, 英雄, heroes wandering or flying around, but there's also the haters who you could imagine might say something like, 英咩雄啊,佢冇有你講得咁好啫,英什麼雄呀,他沒有你說的那麼好呀. What hero? He's not all that, like you say he is.
You know, I'd like to say we each have some control over the world in which we live in. So why not just say enough of the negativity? But we're not out of the woods yet, at least not in this dialogue. Because the next line is also cause for sorrow.
自從呢個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到而家一直都冇法子同我醫生聯絡。自從這個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到現在都無法跟我醫生聯絡。
Let's look at one of the new words here.
Pandemic, 大流行, 大流行 is made up of the root components big, 大, 大. to flow, to circulate or spread, 老流. And of the many meanings of 行行, in circulation would probably be the most apt meaning to support the sum total of the word it's a part of, 大流行, 大流行, pandemic.
Let's move forward and look at another new word.
Unable to, incapable, 冇法子, 无法. That's made up of 冇, 无, that means to not have, and 法子, 法, that means method or way. Makes sense, right? To not have a way or method to do something is to be unable to or be incapable, 冇法子, 无法, of doing something.
The final new word is the last word of the sentence.
聯絡, 聯絡, meaning to get in touch with, to contact, to get a hold of, whose first root component, 聯, 連, means to connect, join, and the second component, 絡, 絡, means enmesh, wrap around, web, net. So the meanings of both root components contribute to the meaning of the combined word 聯絡, 聯絡, that means to make a connection. I want to point out the web and net meanings for 絡, 絡, of 聯絡, 聯絡, gives rise to the words for the World Wide Web, that is the internet, 網絡, 網絡, and how you would say in-network doctor, 網絡內醫生, 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 網絡內醫生. The kinds of doctors that are more cost-effective if you're on a PPO plan.
Let's look at how these new words play out in the original sentence.
自從呢個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到而家一直都冇法子同我醫生聯絡。自從這個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到現在都無法跟我醫生聯絡。
This concludes another 2 lines from the dialogue for this video. Let's hear them together in their respective languages.
醫咩生啊？自從呢個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到而家一直都冇法子同我醫生聯絡。醫什麼生呀？自從這個 COVID-19 大流行開始，我到現在都無法跟我醫生聯絡。
Here's a preview of what's to come.
我白白喺度聽發霉嘅等待音樂，我白白地聽乏味的等待音樂。I want to express my gratitude to Yuki Maruyama for giving her permission to use the photo of Mom immersed in Maruyama's artwork of the phenomena binocular rivalry that was installed in the gallery space of Adobe Books in San Francisco's Mission District in January of 2020.